Tonight, a problem solver's investigation so explosive,
I'm not going to put my name on something that might get somebody killed.
it pushed state leaders into action.
I have made it clear based on what I saw in your report.
Watch the complete story, from drinking on the job to dangerous defects and the video they didn't want you to see.
It's a disaster waiting to happen.
Under the Bridge, a problem solver's investigation special starts right now.
Good evening. I'm Tracy Vetter. The KOMO 4 problem solvers have spent the better part of this year investigating the construction of the new 520 floating bridge. What we've uncovered has led to an independent review of the project, the appointment of a monitor from the Federal Highway Administration, and a public outcry for answers that has grown stronger with each of our reports. But it all started with an unusual news tip that the employees on the new 520 bridge project spent their days at work kicking back beers. Well, tonight we take a look at how that one tip uncovered a tidal wave of trouble under the 520 bridge. Our hidden camera video tells the story. Worker after worker after worker with a beer in their hand or at their desk in the middle of the afternoon.
People drink pretty heavily, and I mean, you could just, it's all over the place. You can smell it.
Our source was at the site daily for 2 months and was so disgusted by what she saw, she asked the problem solvers to step in. She told us people here drink almost every day of the week.
Every day, on Monday through Thursday. Some people have 1, 2, 3, and on Friday, it's a 6-pack.
And this isn't just any business, it's the project headquarters for the 520 bridge replacement. That's a $586 million contract, over $500 million taxpayer dollars, ultimately paying for these workers to drink on the job.
You would think that somebody, some supervisor, somebody would say, hey, we can't do this, this isn't allowed.
In fact, it's not allowed. State law prohibits alcohol in the workplace.
Anything that clouds your judgment is going to be a problem.
So there's no place, no allowance for drinking on the job.
The state rules are very clear. There's alcohol and drugs are prohibited from the workplace.
KGM won the bid to design and build the 520 bridge. It's a complex and complicated project, and all the design work and project oversight happens here, where both KGM and State Department of Transportation WashDOT employees work. I'm with KOMO TV. I'd like to talk to you. We went to the project office at 3 o'clock last Friday afternoon looking for the boss. While we were waiting, to our amazement, we saw 2 workers walk in the front door, each carrying a 12-pack of beer. So what did you do with the beer that you guys brought in?
I have no idea.
You have no idea?
No idea.
We're directed to another man who's identified as a manager but did not offer his name. We've seen lots of folks in this area drinking on the job in front of their computers. Now we just saw 2 people walk in, each carrying a half rack of beer. Is that common practice around here?
Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
How often do you have beer in here, though?
I'm not commenting on any of that.
But as we're walking out, we passed the room we'd seen the beer disappear into earlier. I'd like to take a look in the refrigerator here. And sure enough, okay, so there's 2 half racks of beer in there. Both WashDOT and KGM launched investigations after our story aired. The state told us none of their workers were involved in the drinking. Although Kiewit, the prime contractor, reprimanded a number of its workers, no one was ever fired due to what we uncovered. What did happen, though, was that insiders on the project contacted us after that story to say the drinking on the job was only the tip of the problems plaguing this project. They alleged the very integrity of the bridge had been compromised by shoddy work, design mistakes, and construction shortcuts. And it all started at the foundation, those giant pontoons that will be the base of the bridge. The problem started at the Aberdeen casting basin, where 33 of the pontoons will be built, including 21 longer than a football field. Last May, WashDOT discovered extensive cracking and what's called spalling in the first set. Though WashDOT has posted dozens of photos of the Aberdeen project online, it's not made public any photos of this spalling. But these internet images from other projects show spalling as flaking or chipping in concrete. An insider with first-hand knowledge of the project contacted the problem solvers and told us the damage was so severe, in some cases, entire wall sections were blown out.
It's pretty disturbing to see something like that, where normally that's not the type of thing we find.
John Riley headed up a panel of WashDOT hired experts tasked with finding what caused the pontoon damage. They discovered it was something called post-tensioning. These images from inside the existing 520 bridge show that post-tensioning is when cables are pulled through the sections of a pontoon, compressing and strengthening the entire structure. But WashDOT's own expert panel found that contractor Kiewit General did not follow the design drawings for placing those cables, and during that compression process, the pontoons were severely damaged. Is this the issue here? It deviated from the contract drawings?
Correct.
WashDOT and Kiewit General launched a series of repairs, and in July, just before the first set of pontoons was floated out of Aberdeen, WashDOT said the pontoons were good to go.
All of the cracks had been repaired.
Then came that August 22nd inspection. In Pontoon V, they found a leak at an internal construction joint. The water was not coming from Lake Washington and has since been repaired. But inside Pontoon W, long streaks of white indicate They indicate weeping, or water seeping into the pontoon from Lake Washington. Our insider insists WashDOT and Kiewit General are taking a lot of shortcuts because of pressure for the schedule. Even worse, the insider tells us that what's potentially at risk is the very integrity of the new bridge. The insider pointed to the 1990 collapse of the eastbound I-90 bridge. Investigators found contractor error and previously identified pontoon cracks led a single pontoon to sink, pulling down multiple bridge sections. Drawing a connection to the new 520 pontoons, the insider says one cracked pontoon can compromise the rest. WashDOT insists the cracks in its pontoons were both expected and repairable and will last for 75 years or longer.
We built pontoons that are some of the best pontoons that the Department of Transportation had ever constructed.
In fact, Western Washington is known as the leader in building floating bridges. And yet we uncovered flaws in every single one of the first 6 pontoons built in Aberdeen. But it wasn't until months after we asked for video evidence of those flaws that we began to uncover the full scope of the problems. In pontoon, after pontoon, after pontoon, we uncovered evidence of leaks in dozens of the interior compartments called cells.
How deep is it?
The problem solvers obtained thousands of pages of public records and hours of video inspections inside the first 6 pontoons built in Aberdeen and floated to Lake Washington. What we found is far different from what the Washington Department of Transportation, WashDOT, told us just last month when we asked about this leak in Pontoon V and about the water weeping through this wall in Pontoon W. Is that the only leak that you've identified?
That is the only leak that we've identified.
In fact, according to video shot in August and just released to the problem solvers, all 6 of the pontoons have experienced leaks, as many as 36 cells leaking water either from Lake Washington or from water intentionally placed inside to keep the pontoons floating evenly. But WashDOT told us... Is that the only leak that you've identified?
That is the only leak that we've identified.
And then how many walls have you identified?
There's a couple.
Couple?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just a couple of cells?
The walls are external walls.
2 separate WashDOT insiders who asked to remain anonymous tell us they've never seen this many leaks and what they called extensive cracking in brand new pontoons.
It's already been exposed to seawater and the rebar is rusting.
The problem solvers uncovered documentation that all 6 of the first pontoons developed extensive cracks while concrete hardened or cured. This drawing, called crack mapping, is of the top and bottom slabs of one of the pontoons. Engineering reports found that the cracking appears to be similar in all 6 pontoons out of Aberdeen. A consultant's report in July raised concerns about whether the repairs could remain watertight. And by late August, internal WashDOT emails verified that many of the crack repairs are brittle and have already failed.
If they're already leaking, that's troublesome.
State Representative Mike Armstrong is the ranking member for the House Transportation Committee. He's disturbed by what we uncovered and that WashDOT hasn't been more open.
So we have to make sure that we have it fixed now before we start building these other probably 30 pontoons.
Both our insiders say the problems with these first pontoons already undermines the structural integrity of the new $4.6 billion bridge. Then there's the money. The whole financial deal with two independent contracts but one primary contractor seems to favor that contractor, Kiewit, at the expense of taxpayers. Every day Kiewit in Aberdeen is late with pontoons, they owe the state $10 grand. But that also makes the pontoons late getting to Lake Washington. And on that contract, the state has to pay Kiewit $100 grand a day. So every late day, parent company Kiewit makes an extra $90 grand, even though the problem started with Kiewit's other contract in Aberdeen. Transportation Secretary Paula Hammond says the need to get the bridge built by their 2014 deadline dictated the terms of the contracts.
We took a risk and we took a very aggressive schedule in order to make sure that we can replace this bridge.
WashDOT says it can't give us an estimate, but the records they gave the problem solvers show 74 days worth of delays and at least $2 million in repairs. That adds up to nearly $9 million to taxpayers.
I'd like to know who came up with that plan because that doesn't seem like a plan that's going to benefit the citizens of the state of Washington.
At $4.1 billion, this is the most expensive public construction project in state history. And with each of our reports, the citizens of Washington demanded answers. So we went to the governor to get some. At the same time, more proof was emerging that lead engineers on the project were raising red flag after red flag.
I have made it clear, based on what I saw in your report, that I want another independent expert panel to review them.
The state of these pontoons is also causing internal strife in WashDOT. In a detailed report, one engineer wrote he believes corners were cut in an attempt to save money, time, and meet intense schedule pressures. He asked to stay off the Aberdeen site, criticizing the contractor's repairs to the pontoons and writing they are taking a huge gamble with a critical public asset. Governor Gregoire told me today that she wants the expert panel to decide whether or not the pontoons are safe.
So I thank you for bringing everything to our attention. We are absolutely going to guarantee the public, 1, transparency, 2, safety, and 3, protect the taxpayer's dollar.
When we return, an inspector on the project explains the construction mistakes he saw firsthand and why he thinks the new bridge is a disaster waiting to happen. After our first story aired, a former inspector contacted us. He told us the quality of work on those first pontoons was the shoddiest he'd ever seen and that no one is holding the contractor accountable. WashDOT denied his claims, but their own internal audit told a different story.
To me, it's a disaster. It's a disaster waiting to happen.
This man was an on-site quality inspector at Kiewit Construction's pontoon casting basin in Aberdeen last winter. He was there during construction of the first 6 massive concrete pontoons designed to hold up the new 520 bridge.
I won't drive across that bridge when they have it built.
Why?
Why would you drive across something that you know might fail? You know, it is a danger factor.
The inspector, who asked for anonymity, was part of a quality assurance subcontractor team hired by contractor Kiewit to ensure correct pontoon construction. The QA, as it's called, is required by the State Department of Transportation's contract with Kiewit. He's been an inspector for 10 years.
It's the worst I've been on for inferior work.
Our inspector confirmed what 2 expert insiders had previously told the problem solvers, that construction of the first pontoons was so shoddy it undermines the structural integrity and safety of the new 520 bridge. Our inspector says every day he saw iron workers misplacing or using the wrong-sized rebar. That's the structural steel that provides the strength and framework for the pontoons.
Rebar not having the correct clearances, rebar being out of place, bars being missing. It's not correct and it should not be signed off.
He says contractor Kiewit routinely poured massive walls of concrete to form the pontoons when conditions were either too wet.
They pour in such heavy rains and standing water that the cement is literally being washed out of the concrete.
Or when conditions were too cold and the rebar was frozen.
It shocks the concrete. And there'll be a circumference around the rebar with weakened inferior concrete.
A WSDOT internal document called a risk register even says concrete cracking in pontoons is an issue caused by Kiewit not following the plan for curing or hardening concrete, particularly during cold weather, and that it could potentially cost as much as $3 million. Inspectors are supposed to write up such work in what's called non-compliance reports, or NCRs, but
a few times I went to write non-compliances and I was actually reprimanded by my boss.
The inspector says he was one of several inspectors ultimately laid off, not fired, and told it was at Kiewit's demand because he wouldn't sign off on inferior work.
I'm not going to put my name on something that might get somebody killed or hurt. It's just not going to happen.
We asked Kiewit and WSDOT about the inspector's allegations. WSDOT never answered us. Instead, by chance, we found a posting on WSDOT's webpage calling the inspector's allegations vague and referencing Kiewit's quality management plan. Kiewit spokesman Tom Jansen said only, "While we take all claims very seriously, we cannot respond to vague, nonspecific, and unsubstantiated allegations." However, many of the issues raised by the inspector are substantiated in a scathing internal audit produced by WSDOT's own engineers, which the problem solvers obtained through a public records request. That audit found a pattern of noncompliance and failure to implement corrective action on the part of Kiewit, and that WSDOT failed to hold the contractor accountable.
Kiewit is so big and powerful. WSDOT can't stand up to him. Kiewit actually pushes WSDOT around.
The audit focused specifically on problems with concrete poured during cold weather and how concrete cured or hardened. Both affect how much the concrete will crack. And according to these crack maps of the first pontoons, all 6 experienced significant cracking. Though WSDOT has undertaken several rounds of repairs of these pontoons, WSDOT confirmed last week that the 4 largest are still leaking. They plan to begin another round of repairs early next year. In its online posting, WSDOT says KOMO needs to understand there is a rigorous quality program. But the audit cited that exact program, noting with report after report after report, 42 total, where Kiewit and WSDOT failed to follow plans to produce good concrete and failed to solve the recurring problems.
It's criminal in my book. Somebody up there needs to do a little jail time because they're stealing money from the taxpayers.
Kiewit answered our questions about the audit by email, saying in part that they have a rigorous and redundant quality management program and that no single inspector is responsible for oversight. But long before construction on the 520 began, questions had already arisen about the quality of Kiewit's work. A state Senate investigation is underway in California, where Kiewit is building the New Bay Bridge. And again, the questions in that project center on their concrete construction. Specifically, there are alleged structural flaws in the single high tower that serves as a stabilizer for the western span of that bridge. In spite of that, Caltrans stands by the structural integrity of that bridge and its contractor, Kiewit. But California State Senator Mark DeSaulnier has called for an investigation into the bridge safety and Kiewit construction.
If they have hidden information on the testing, if they've failed the testing, that's what the extra investigation that we're going through right now hopefully will find out for us.
The Mariners are also suing Kiewit over alleged construction defects they made while helping to construct Safeco Field back in 2006. Cracks and leaks are not the only problems experts say could compromise the integrity of the pontoons. When we return, the problem solvers uncover a structural mistake made by Kiewit that experts say could cause a catastrophe. Since our investigation began, professionals inside and out of the project are calling for the state to reject the first 6 pontoons built for the bridge and start over. They point to the I-90 bridge where one problem pontoon being repaired by contractors sank during a severe storm in 1990. Yearly inspections since have found most recently that of 2,008 cells or compartments inside the I-90 pontoons, only 7 have leaks. Compare that to the brand new 520 pontoons where we found as many as 36 cells already riddled with cracks and leaks. But how does that compare to the current bridge when it was built 50 years ago?
We did not have leaks. We did not have cracks.
Jerry Purdom is a retired engineer.
That's me there.
His first big job was the original 520 bridge, building pontoons from 1960 to 63. Purdom says even 50 years ago, the pontoons they built, massive at 360 feet long, had no cracks and no leaks.
The pontoons never took on water. They never had a leak.
How deep is it?
So now Purdom can't understand how or why Washington's Department of Transportation is having so many problems with the first 6 pontoons. A problem solver investigation revealed last week that all 6 pontoons had leaks, even leaking through, in some cases, extensive repairs. Purdom says as a professional and as a taxpayer, he's concerned.
What are they going to do with those 6 pontoons? They're allowing them to bolting them up in the lake now. They're not going to be rejected?
Do you think they should be?
Yes.
Why?
Because they're leaking.
And a WashDOT insider who asked to remain anonymous also believes that, like Purdom, the state should reject all 6 of the first pontoons and tell contractor Kiewit in Aberdeen to start over.
This is not a typical girder or bridge beam holding up a flat slab on ground. This is a floating structure. I think this is wrong.
Now the problem solvers have uncovered a new structural problem buried in thousands of documents we obtained through the Public Records Act. The type of structural weakness that could be as catastrophic as WashDOT's own animation depicting how the old bridge might come apart in a severe storm. The key is the joints between pontoons and how they're connected with rebar called hook bars. Internal WashDOT emails from last spring show that structural rebar in Pontoon V was missing. WashDOT's own engineer Patrick Clark noted that he could not structurally approve it without those essential pieces. In spite of that, documents show that contractor Kiewit opted to ignore Clark's recommendations for repair and, quote, proceed at risk. Kiewit went on to do the same with the 2 other large pontoons, so all 3 now on the lake are missing that rebar. A second WashDOT engineer also found this was not structurally acceptable. Documents and our insider indicate that just like in the WashDOT animation, the loss of that critical rebar would weaken the joints by as much as 50% and could cause a similar unraveling in a severe 100-year storm event.
They've got some problems. They should find out what it is and solve it before they continue placing pontoons.
Construction on the next set of pontoons is well underway, and already more cracks. A look at that when we return. Plus, WashDOT makes a stunning announcement on the state of the project next. When WashDOT discovered the extensive cracking and leaking in every single one of the first 6 pontoons built, they hired an expert review panel to find out what caused the spalling, cracking, and leaking. The goal for creating the review panel was to make sure the same mistakes made while building the first set of pontoons would not be repeated while building the second set of pontoons. This is what WashDOT told us in September.
In cycle 2, we are looking to implement the recommendations of the expert review panel. We don't expect that to occur in cycles 2 through 6 here.
Fast forward to November, when the problem solvers uncovered structural cracking that is so extensive in the second set of pontoons that 9 interior panels had to be recast. So what's the state learned from the leaking pontoons? The review panel is expected to wrap up its second investigation by year's end. Regardless of what they find, though, WashDOT recently told the problem solvers that they will stand by those first pontoons and have no plans to reject them, saying a little leaking will not harm the structural integrity of the bridge. Earlier this month, WashDOT announced the problems with the pontoons have forced them to push back the opening of the new bridge from their 2014 deadline to at least the summer of 2015. Only time will tell, and the problem solvers will be there every step of the way. For more information on all of our 520 investigations, including internal documents and emails that have helped us bring you this important story, be sure to check our website at komonews.com/520. For the KOMO 4 Problem Solvers, I'm Tracy Vetter. Good night.
Fisher Communications.